YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back. Today I want to talk about the 5-star players or close to star players that are holding out of mandatory mini camps. Those players are 2 running backs. You got Saquon, Barkley, Josh Jacobs. You have Danielle Hunter of the Vikings. You have Stephon Diggs, which is an interesting one, and Chris Jones of the Chiefs, of course. So I have trade scenarios for these players, mainly because it's interesting. We'll talk about chances these players are traded. There's one that really stands out, more likely to be traded than the rest. So we're not going to overreact and say these players will be traded. We're not going to do that here. But it is fun to talk about these things, just kind of give you an idea, maybe a value, which team they can land on. So always have a fun time doing these trade scenarios. So always talking with you guys on this stuff on Twitter. There's been some signings lately as well. Link pin in the comments for our Twitter. Also, there's links down there for everything else. Our sponsors, check it out. Liquid IV, GLD Shop, Code GOAT. Been doing more YouTube shorts lately. Check that out. Like, subscribe to notifications on. So the first player, I have 2 scenarios for Danielle Hunter, who is of this list by far the most likely to be traded. I think the chances he's traded are pretty high. The Vikings would like to keep him, but they have to sit down and figure out what he wants and is it realistic for them. And if they get a pretty good offer, they could trade him because he's a very good player, but he's always wanting more money, it seems like, and he does have some injury concerns. So the Ravens are the first scenario here. I thought that was an interesting one. I even ended up throwing a player back to Minnesota because maybe they'll want a pass rusher back. They do have depth, though. They just, if they lose Danielle Hunter, they kind of need a Danielle Hunter replacement. But you could see a guy like Tyus Bowser go back who kind of, fit a little, he definitely did. He fit a little bit better when Martindale was there. And I think he would fit with that Flores defense in Minnesota. He's an edge rusher that can drop back in coverage pretty well, but doesn't hold tremendous value. But I like the Ravens because the Ravens are interesting because this is the type of deal that they would make. Like, get a guy an expiring deal, give him more money right now on his 1 year left. I don't think they would extend him right away. They could. I don't think they would extend him right away. We don't necessarily know Hunter needs a long-term extension. It sounds like that, but I really think he just needs a raise on this year because it's a little cheap. So the Ravens would be willing to do that, give a pretty decent raise this year, have him play out this year, decide if they're going to extend him or not. Look at Roquan Smith, but they've done these deals in the past. Yannick Ngakoue with Minnesota in the past too, and then possibly let him walk after this year and get a really good compensatory pick. That's kind of like the lower tier option, I guess, but it's possible for the Ravens. They aren't afraid to let that happen. For those reasons, it makes some sense. He's pretty scheme versatile. I do think he fits the 4-3 better, but the Ravens would make it work with him. And, because there's not a lot of, confirmed, like, who's going to be a big-time pass rusher for the Ravens. There's a lot of young upside guys there that I feel pretty good about, but there's nothing, that team's trying to win right now. There's nothing really set, like, confirmed that this pass rusher will be dominant. Again, excited about, Away, Ajabo, guys like that. But so getting a little more proven guy in there. 2nd round pick. Sounds like the Vikings are looking for at least a 2nd round pick. So 2024 2nd, 2025 6th. Thought about a 5th here, but Tyus Bowser is pretty solid. He can drop in coverage, which I think the Vikings will be looking for here pretty well. If Bowser's not involved there, maybe a 2nd and a 4th perhaps. So that's the tricky part with Hunter because the Vikings are looking for that. Otherwise, they will continue to negotiate with him. But it is tricky to give up extreme value for Hunter because he's really good, but always wanting more money, and he does have the injury concern. And his stats were really good last year, but he was a little hot and cold, I thought, based on what I saw on the field, not so much the stats. So I will be cautious, will be careful if I'm another team, but I did think the Ravens make sense. I think the perfect fit, again, probably 4-3, but he's scheme versatile. He's proven that. This is kind of like a Ravens move that they would make. So on this list, star players, but Hunter is the guy that most likely is going to be traded. Like, if a guy on this list was going to be on this video is going to be traded, it's going to be Danielle Hunter. So we have another scenario. Now, there's a lot of teams, that I can see trading for Hunter. Did I talk about on Twitter a little bit? I can see the Saints, I can see the Falcons, the Panthers, the Chiefs. There's multiple teams here. But I thought the Texans made some sense, get a solid fit opposite of Will Anderson. They're looking to have that defense compete, right now, next year, the year after. They're not trying to wait 5 years, So I think a really good fit in D'Amico Ryan's defense, like I said. So that made some sense. A player could go back to Minnesota. Didn't really see like that. We talked about the Ravens, that Tyus Bowser fit. So a second and a fifth, one of the Texans draft picks, maybe a little bit more valuable than the Ravens, who we just talked about. Keep in mind. So second and fifth, second and fourth is possible. I'd be careful if I was the Texans with that. Second and fourth, in my opinion, just because of the risk, you got to give him a new deal. Possibly. I mean, he needs more money either way. And then is the contract question's going to come back up, and then the injury concern. But very good player for sure. So that I thought made sense with the Texans. They made a lot of sense. I thought the Ravens, Texans, Chiefs really made some sense. Like I said, this seems like a really good Saints fit. They did draft Foskey. They are tight in cap in the future. They don't really worry about future cap at the time, though. Falcons already made some moves, but they could get better. Panthers, they have Brian Burns to worry about paying. The Bears would be interested. I don't know if the Vikings would trade him there. They could, but it might take more. Probably not worth it for the Bears. And people say the Vikings have done in-division trades. Well, they got Hawkinson. They're good with getting the premier player. Are they good with sending it away in division? And then draft picks, it's not, there wasn't a proven player in those draft picks. So, the Bears would highly be interested. I don't know if it would go down unless they paid a premium where the Vikings would win the trade. So I would not recommend it. But it'd be dependent on if the Bears want to do it or not. Obviously, not what I think they should do. But yeah, so teams like that. I mean, there's several teams, but those were two that made some sense to me. And then to the people want to talk about this, but two running backs we'll talk about: Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, who are on the franchise tag, would like a contract, which I can't really blame them. Tricky situation, though. There is not a long list of teams that are going to trade for a running back, especially here in June. And you have to pay kind of a good amount for these running backs, and Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. So it is pretty tricky for these players. They're pretty much stuck. Like, you can hold out, you can sit out this year, or you can play on the franchise tag, play yourself a big contract next year. Sometimes with the running backs, maybe you're better off saving your legs. Maybe they sit out the whole year. I don't see these players doing that, and they love the game too much, want to help their teams win. They want that too much. You would think Barkley's value maybe a little more in this because he's one of the best backs in football. You saw what McCaffrey just got traded for, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever it was. Barkley, just an electrifying player, really, really good, still young. I think at this time, though, in June, this time of the year in June, not a long list of teams. If he's holding out, he's holding out. I think the value kind of drops. Would a team even trade today? Would they even trade a second and a fourth? I'm looking through the teams. There's teams that we talk about with running backs. I think the teams that just need to sign a running back, maybe they'll look to sign Dalvin Cook. He's a pretty good running back available there. But the teams that need a running back, but that actually could afford trade picks away, would they be willing to do that? There's really not many. You start talking about other teams, that it just doesn't make a lot of sense for some of these other teams. So the Cardinals are a team that can pay a guy like that, have a lot of draft picks. With the new system they're putting in is really running the ball is really going to be valuable. It's really going to be important. Totally different scheme what they've been running, a lot more outside zone. So the Cardinals are like, if somebody was going to trade for a Barkley or a Jacobs, and I have the same exact thing here for Josh Jacobs. That's the Cardinals is the team I'm looking for. I'm not, and again, chances Jacobs is traded low. Teams aren't throwing draft picks at running backs at this time of the year. They're pretty much ready to go in the season. And the team that isn't probably going to sign Dalvin Cook or maybe Kareem Hunt, who's out there. So I'm not really counting on running back trades, like big running back trades, and especially because these guys are very valuable right now. There's teams that you could say need a running back, but those teams just aren't going to trade for a running back. If there was a team, and I'm not saying they're going to do it, but if there was a team that would actually do this, I'd say the Cardinals. A couple running backs that are still got bright futures. They're very young. That's where I like Jacobs a little more than Barkley. Barkley might be a little more electrifying, but Jacobs is a year younger, no major injuries, really just started taking off. I mean, he was already really good, but he really like what he did last year was like, okay, this guy's getting going now. So if there was a team if there was a running back I would be comfortable trading for, given a big deal, it'd be Jacobs. And a team like that is going to value the running the football going forward, and could afford to do it. Again, the Cardinals. So there is not a long list of teams that would be willing to do that. So second and fourth, I think these guys are more talented than that. But again, no one's trading anything more than that. I'm not counting on this to happen either, but no one's trading more than that today, June 13th, going forward here. Not that it's super close to the season, but you get my point, kind of getting closer to the season here. So interesting stuff going on with Stephon Diggs. And again, I put very low Stephon Diggs, chances of getting traded. I had to put that in there because I didn't want anybody thinking I'm overreacting here. These guys are holding out, so they're all getting traded. Because there are a lot of people out there like that. I see it on Twitter all the time. Their team's getting this guy because he said this and he held out for a day. But this is stuff that people want to talk about. So maybe you say, why do it at all? It's stuff that people want to talk about. I think it's pretty interesting. And we've very recently done videos like this with more of the Danielle Hunters, more likely to be traded. Right now, out of the big-time players holding out, Danielle Hunter is kind of the guy that, that's the guy to watch. But interesting situation with Stephon Diggs, could get resolved, but it's not a money situation. I guess maybe he's not happy he wasn't involved in picking coaches around the staff, and Josh Allen was. I know he wasn't really happy with the playoff performance. Josh Allen, Diggs gets frustrated pretty easily. I do think you can calm him down. He gets emotional in the spot. But we saw it in Minnesota. He thought maybe he's a little all talk, but no, demanded a trade. He got out of there. I think he's a little happier in Buffalo maybe, but maybe he's not thrilled with McDermott's. McDermott's getting frustrated. I think that's pretty clear. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to piss off Diggs. So maybe he's going to get more frustrated. I don't know. It's the 13th right now. This is kind of new, but people are going to talk about it. They probably want me to talk about it. I still don't expect the Bills to trade Stephon Diggs. Where would he go? Well, he's talented, so teams would take him. But so I don't mean it. Who would take him? I don't mean like no one will take him. But he has to go. First I was like, all right, he's not even happy with Josh Allen. He wasn't happy with Kirk Cousins. Not happy with Josh Allen. He needs the best of the best quarterbacks. And you start looking at those teams, and it's like, who can make it happen? Who would the Bills send him to? I mean, you come up with the Chiefs. The Chiefs would do it. He would play for the Chiefs. The Bills aren't sending him to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bengals they're not trading him to the Bengals. They're set at receiver anyways. So you look at these like premier quarterback teams, and they don't really make a whole lot of sense. I thought about the Eagles for a second. I think Diggs would be good. We would be good with that, but I don't know if the Eagles would do it. I think just too many similarities with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in terms of style receiver. Is there room for a third one there and to pay him, the money that he's getting, and then you got to trade big picks? I don't see it. So that kind of just leaves the Giants. And I know maybe, if he's frustrated with Josh Allen and was with Kirk Cousins, he was getting really frustrated with Daniel Jones, maybe. So that is the major issue. But there are familiar faces there with Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. I think that makes a lot of sense. He was a little happier with the way the offense was called before this year. So Brian Daboll kind of coming into play again there. So that's big. They're looking for a big time, like a proven receiver. And they would be willing to do this. So that's really the only team right now that makes some sense. He's actually cheaper this year too, so the Giants could afford him this year and in the future. So it's really right now the only team that makes sense. I think he's worth more than a first and a fourth, but again, at this point of the offseason, if a guy's if he were to get traded, I'm not saying he is getting traded. I'd put very low down there, but if he gets to the point where he's being traded, it's almost like he's forcing himself out. So I don't know if the value would be much more than this, maybe a little bit, but first and a fourth is what made sense there. And again, the Giants are really the only team that made a lot of sense to me when it came to this. But that not that other teams, like 0% chance for other teams, but I'm counting on them figuring it out, and him staying with the Bills here. I'm counting on that. But that is big talk today, so I did want to kind of talk about it. It's good to get a trade scenario out there. See, again, the important things I broke down on where he could go, why it wouldn't work, why the Bills wouldn't trade him there. I think that's an important part of this video, but I think it's also important. A big part of this video is not just saying this guy could be traded, or not really what I'm saying. that I'm not going to, again, chances of being traded is that's a big part of this video. Very low. I'm optimistic with them figuring that out. And another one is a star player. And I have similar trade compensation there for Chris Jones, the defense tackle of the Chiefs, who I actually thought was the best defensive player in football last year. If he were, because, he's holding out at camp right now. He wants a new contract. Tweeted the other day, or was on Instagram, I think. Time's ticking, something like that. And he does want to be a Chief for life. He said before he would even take somewhat of a discount to play there. That's great. So I do expect him back there. I think they'll work out a deal at some point. But maybe the Chiefs just are like, what Tyreek Hill, like, hey, we don't even want to give him a deal. We just rather trade him, get some picks. I don't see that, but that's actually a possibility, I suppose. And if he were to get traded, I thought about a few teams here, but it would be a team that actually has a lot of cap space right now and the future, so both there. I thought about two NFC North teams. I thought about the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears. The Lions a little bit more geared towards, winning right now. Didn't really add to the interior defensive linemen. They got some good young ones that are getting better. The Bears added in the draft. They definitely could get better still. The Lions are a little more focused on right now, like championship football right now, so I thought they made a little bit more sense. But those are actually two teams that stood out right away to me, two NFC North teams. And then I actually thought a scenario we could have done, it's just getting a little ridiculous, though, like too much has to happen. But if both players were to be traded, it actually makes sense. With another NFC North team, the Vikings, Danielle Hunter, could he go to the Chiefs? Could Chris Jones go to the Vikings? The Vikings would have to give up more along with Danielle Hunter in that scenario. But that's interesting to think about. It's always interesting to think about these things. So NFC North team is what I came up with for Chris Jones. But I think his value is a little bit more. But again, if we're talking scenario, if a trade happened, not last year, not the year before, not during the season. We're talking about like a scenario where if a trade were to happen now or this offseason, again, it's June, or whether it's June, July, teams aren't trading the house at that time of the year for players. If they are traded, it's for a reason, like they're demanding out, holding out. Teams don't want to pay those players. So the value does drop a little bit, but I think it's just another star, just like Diggs. I think it's another star player where the value normally would be a little bit more, but you got to understand the situation, for things here. So that's why the value could change by month, really. But the time of the year, again, if a player is traded at this time of the offseason, the value is usually a little lower because, again, they're pretty much forcing their way out. So that isn't me saying Chris Jones is forcing his way out, but if we get to the point of the trade, that's the case. So, but again, we've been doing videos like this with more realistic guys, but we got to the point where there's star players being talked about on Twitter like crazy. Danielle Hunter was the main focus point of the trade part of this video because that is a very realistic one. And covering the other guys, again, the point was which team would make the most sense, what is the trade value, but also to get the point across that I'm not really counting on those guys to be traded for. The running backs for different reasons. I think these guys down here are just too valuable. Not that the running backs aren't, but the running backs, it's like kind of both sides. Your teams really want to trade for a running back right now, and do their teams really want to trade those running back? So a little actually different. The running backs are a little different from the Chris Jones, Stephon Diggs situation. So there's going to be some overreactors in the comments. Maybe that didn't understand the video. It wasn't just purely trade. These guys are being traded. This is where they're going. Not at all. So hopefully we don't have any of those idiots in the comments there, but oh well. But Danielle Hunter is definitely a guy to watch. And again, there's recent videos just like this with other guys to watch. We've been talking about these guys. Buda Baker's been brought up, Kevin Byard. So there's some big-time players there we've talked about. Then we got some free agents new big-time free agents that we recently talked about. Dalvin Cook, very recent video, the most recent video actually. On the DeAndre Hopkins we've talked about in the past and keeping you guys up to date on Twitter with that. We saw Adrian Amos get signed today by the Jets. That was pretty good. I had some, I thought, some good info. My thoughts really scheme-wise and why that was interesting. So we talked about it on Twitter. So good reason to follow us there. Like, subscribe, turn notifications on here for the full coverage. Cannot wait for the in-season content. Already ready for that. We still have a lot of off-season stuff to get to, more record predictions, full season playoff predictions. I'm going to rank every player, top 32 players at each position based on how I think they'll play this upcoming year. I always do those. Cannot wait for that stuff. So join us here on the channel. Check out what we got to offer already here and on our Twitter. There's links pinned in the comments for anything you're looking for. Pretty useful stuff. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.